The collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore in March after it was hit by a cargo ship has rekindled interest in the Sunshine Skyway Bridge disaster 44 years ago. A documentary screening this month in Tampa and St. Petersburg tells the story of that bridge collapse and its aftermath through the eyes of people who witnessed it. I'm Matthew Petty, and today on Florida Matters, we'll talk with two people involved in the documentary, including one of the divers who helped recover the victims. On the morning of May 9th, 1980, the freighter MV Summit Venture hit the Sunshine Skyway Bridge during a sudden storm, sending a 1,200-foot-long segment of the bridge into Tampa Bay and killing 35 people. We're broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at WUSF, and I'm joined by Matt Cohen, the marketing director for the movie. Matt, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
And Robert Raiola, a retired Florida Department of Transportation diver who helped in the recovery efforts. Robert, thank you.
No, thank you for having us.
Well, let's start by listening to a clip from the beginning of the documentary. Here's the late Governor Bob Graham, who was Florida's governor when the disaster happened and was instrumental in getting the new bridge built, which opened in 1987. And you'll hear him followed by the film's narrator, John Wilson.
The Sunshine Skyway Bridge is not only the symbol of Tampa Bay, but it's also an important part of the cohesion and economy of the state of Florida. This is the major north-south corridor on the west coast of Florida.
The bridge revolutionized travel, connecting the Gulf Coast with South Florida. Gone were the days of having to board the Beeline ferry or take a roundabout drive through Tampa.
So Matt, why was it important to tell the story of the disaster with this movie?
We feel like it provides a lot of history to the Tampa Bay, St. Pete area. And there was a lot of speculation when the trial was taking place back in the 1980s. So after 40 years, there was still a lot of discovery that the public was unaware of. So the executive producers involved, Steve Yarrett and Frankie Vanderbilt, helped fund the project needs to get this off the ground and help bring this to the light. And when this premiered in 2019 at the Tampa Theater, it did sell out 2 shows right away. And because of that response, we want to keep it going. So
as you mentioned, the documentary was released in 2019. What else made you want to re-release it this year? Well,
we're coming along the 45th anniversary. Next year we'll be honoring that. So we want to keep that, relevant and then bring that to light. But then we also want to add a new layer to the documentary and also bring in stories of the victims as well. Aside from the trial process and, the strengths that Mr. Yarrett went through, we also want to add another piece that incorporates more of the victim stories as well.
And Mr. Yarrett, of course, Steve Yarrett, the attorney for Captain John Lero. So several cars and a Greyhound bus plummeted into the bay and 35 people lost their lives in the disaster, but there were some near misses too. Let's just listen to a little bit of news footage of Richard Hornbuckle from St. Petersburg. He was able to stop his car just a few feet from the edge.
Yeah, it was raining, cats and dogs, of course. It was dark. The wind was blowing like a hurricane. I was driving at about 20-25 miles an hour. A Greyhound bus, I believe, some type of bus, passed me doing about 30-35, very slow. On the outside lane, I switched over. There was a stalled car here and got in behind him. And as I came to the very top of the bridge here, I saw the rest of the bridge was out and applied their brakes immediately and stopped with them about 2 feet of going in.
So in the aftermath of the disaster, harbour pilot John Lero was taken to court, but a judge ultimately cleared him of wrongdoing. Here's Lero's attorney, Steve Yarrett.
If I had to summarize John Lero, a good man in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it destroyed him. I was concerned then, as I am now, that John never got over it. And John didn't get the exoneration.
So Matt, Steve Yarrett is a key figure in this story, and what does the documentary reveal about how he worked to clear Captain Lero and the toll the disaster took on Lero?
Yes, absolutely. So as we know, Captain John Lero was the old harbor pilot responsible for guiding the ship along one of the longest and most treacherous shipping channels in the world. And Steve Yarrett is the trial lawyer who came in to represent Mr. Lero. But as you watch the documentary, you really watch the unfolding of the relationship between Mr. Yarrett and Mr. Lero. During the trial process, you see the extraordinary bond develop more from just the business side, but on a personal level, because Mr. Lerell was getting a lot of accusations thrown at him during that time, and Mr. Garrett did have that big heart into keeping up in that relationship with him. So a lot of that is shown throughout the documentary.
Mm-hmm. So, Robert, I want to bring you into this conversation. What was your role in responding to the disaster, and what do you remember about that day?
Unfortunately, I remember quite a bit. I lived it. All of this new interest after the Baltimore bridge disaster has rekindled tremendous interest in the Skyway story. As much as I hate to say it, I guess probably one of the things that I remember most is the victims. The victims' faces, the expression on their faces. I remember being unable to accept the fact that what had happened on my watch. It took decades for me to be able to even consider talking to or speaking to John Lerell, who I never did. It was, and that's on me. I've had plenty of opportunities. A lot of people have still misconceptions and misinterpret information that was available then. There still is a lot of bitterness and anger, believe it or not. I've been involved intimately, obviously, since it happened, and I can relate to numerous stories of people just thinking that he got off scot-free, Captain Lerell, and that he should have had some disciplinary action other than just losing his license and his inability to pilot ships anymore. He suffered unimaginable hardships that I could never have handled, probably. I don't think I could have dealt as gracefully as he did with the thought that I may have taken some people's lives, especially that many. They were innocent people, many traveling on vacation, many going home from college to see their mom for Mother's Day. Many were headed to Miami, obviously. The bus took off from Chicago. It was headed to Miami. And even those people that boarded the bus in St. Pete obviously had no idea that what was about to happen would suddenly bring their lives to an end, tragic end.
So let's just walk back for a moment and tell me about your role as a diver for the Florida Department of Transportation, because you and one of your colleagues you're part of this documentary. Sort of talk about what you did that day in the aftermath of this disaster. But for folks who don't know, like what was your job essentially?
I had just become the senior underwater bridge inspector for District 1 in the state of Florida. That covers 14 counties in west central Florida.
How many bridges?
Oh, I'm just going to say hundreds, especially underwater bridges. That's what I concentrated on. We were strictly divers. My partner's name was Mike Betts. He was hired 5 working days before that accident. People need to think about that. That's like joining the fire department, police department in New York City on September 6th and then walking up those stairs on September 11th. Obviously, neither one of us knew what we were getting into when we got the call on the radio and heard about it on the TV news, and got a call from our supervisor who was stationed in Tampa. Our office was in Pinellas County. To head out. It was initially an accident investigation. It was my responsibility to ensure that all the bridges that required underwater inspections were inspected to National Highway Inspection Standards. It was my name that was on the bottom of the inspection report for the underwater portions that assured that it was okay and safe for the millions and millions of people that travel across the bridge each year.
So when you get that call, are you sort of thinking, wow, I hope I didn't miss something?
No, unfortunately, and I hate to say it, but the fact is that when I got that call, it was not the call from the boss, but when I first heard about it on TV and the radio, I kind of thought it was a bad joke because let's just call it locker room humor back in the day, and that's what most of the guys would say. Yeah, your bridge got knocked down. Now you got to go out and do this, and you got to do that. It was.
So you thought somebody was pulling your leg?
Yeah, they thought that initially that people were pulling your leg. You never, obviously in your wildest dreams, think that something like that's going to happen. Obviously, when it flashed on TV and when I got the call from our boss, we realized how serious it was and that we needed to get out there. Our ride down from Pinellas to the Skyway took probably half an hour, 40 minutes. We hit the water out there underneath the bridge at about 9:15.
So it was like just about 2 hours after the
Yeah, a little
collapse?
bit, almost 2 hours. It happened at, let's say, 7:34. We were in the water at 9:15. There was another dive crew on scene. It was the Eckerd College Search and Rescue kids. And I'd like to say right off the top of the bat, thank you very much, Eckerd College Search and Rescue Team, for being there and helping us and assisting us with recovering and the victims.
I mean, had you done this kind of work before? Because this is quite specialized stuff, like that sort of like rescue and then what turned into a recovery operation.
I'm just going to say, in a roundabout way, I was a combat vet in Vietnam, so I had seen quite a bit of trauma, quite a bit of confusion and chaos. I had been involved in death. I've seen it firsthand. I've had to deal with it. It was one of those things that you never prepared. There was no glass case on the side of the building that had, in case of Skyway collapse, smash this and read that book. There was no book written. There was no procedures for such a tragic event. It was on the fly. We made it up. I made it up.
Just get in there and see what you can do.
Just get in there. The first thing that our concern is that we needed to do everything that we could to recover, first of all, to make sure that there was no victims still entrapped in the bus or in the vehicles or whatnot, but also to ensure that we recovered as many victims as respectfully and quickly as we could to bring closure to many of the families. When we were headed down in the car, we heard that there may have been two buses. We weren't real sure if there were two or if there was one, if they were full, if they were empty. All we knew is that they were people in the water that needed help. They needed some assistance. So when we got down there, the Eckerd College team was on site. We asked them to back off and get out from underneath what I would consider the flight path of any vehicles or any other garbage or trash coming from the bridge. They were a little reluctant to do so. There was a little bit of territorial squabbling. However, like I said, that was my bridge. It was my responsibility. Eventually, they all returned to the boat and helped us receive the victims that we recovered from inside that bus. After everybody was headed back to the boat, my partner Mike and I rolled into the water. After we broke the surface, we were able to see the bus clearly. The visibility was about 30 foot horizontally, so we were able to get a good idea of what was going on. I was familiar with the bridge and what it looked like while it was still standing. I had climbed it, walked it, and inspected it for almost 5 years prior to that, so I was comfortable in noting where the bus was laying on top of the bridge. The back set of wheels from the bus were floating. The front of the bus, the nose of the bus where the driver would be, was only about 10 or 15 feet below the surface of the water. Mike and I swam towards the front of the bus. I positioned Mike at what would be left of the bus door. I positioned him to hold his position there. Mike Curtin was the bus driver who was responsible for driving that bus that morning, and he was still entrapped behind the seat. He was clearly visible. He had his white shirt, his dark pants. I remember his engineering boots. I know that when I swam to him, I realized what I was getting into. I said a soft prayer, and I apologized.
So there'd been kind of pretty bad weather like that morning, right? I mean, this is sort of explained in the documentary. This is part of the rationale for the reason why the ship hit the bridge. So what was it? Is it kind of cloudy water you were swimming through? Like, what was the visibility like?
The visibility on the water was fantastic. Like I say, we had about 30 foot at the surface. The storm, it was a microburst. It was an event that couldn't have been forecast. Unfortunately, the National Weather Service in Ruskin didn't issue a warning in time. The issue that was given about an hour after the bridge was hit and collapsed. So it didn't do Captain Lero any good that morning when he left the anchorage spot and boarded that vessel to come inbound. He got caught, I'm sure, completely off guard. The vessel was empty. It was higher in the water than it normally would be. The broadside Winds struck it and treated it like a sail and pushed them significantly off course. The radar screen turned into a whiteout or a blackout. There was absolutely no way he could see it on radar. He positioned some crew members on the bow of the boat to help assist with visual aids, channel markers and whatnot. However, by the time that he struck the bridge, it was way too late to do anything about it. He did prepare a little bit before. He had ordered the anchors ready to be dropped. I'm sure he realized after a certain point that he was off course and he probably would strike the bridge. But you can't stop those things on a dime. You can't stop them within a quarter mile, a half a mile. It takes quite some distance. Mm-hmm. He did everything humanly possible once he realized he was going to strike that bridge to slow it down and to stop it. I can assure everybody that had he not taken the precautions that he did, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have more than likely taken the second bridge down and taken them both out at the same time. But his action saved the northbound span and countless lives.
You're listening to Florida Matters. We're talking with Matt Cohen, Marketing Director for the Skyway Bridge Disaster documentary, and Robert Raiola, a retired Florida Department of Transportation diver who was involved in the recovery effort after the bridge collapse. Still to come, lessons learned from the Sunshine Skyway and similarities to the Baltimore bridge collapse. Welcome back to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. We're talking about the Skyway Bridge Disaster documentary. We're talking with Matt Cohen, Marketing Director for the documentary, and Robert Raiola, a retired Florida Department of Transportation diver who was involved in the recovery effort. A portion of the bridge plunged into Tampa Bay on the morning of May 9th, 1980, after a freighter slammed into it. 6 cars, a truck, and a Greyhound bus crashed into the water, and 35 people were killed. The disaster has eerie similarities to the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore in March, which killed 6 people. Crews there have been working to remove segments of the damaged bridge to reopen the channel for ship traffic. Robert, it sounds like for a long time you were kind of maybe reluctant to think about the captain, John Lero, and sort of reconcile what you might have felt was his responsibility for this.
Unfortunately, I'm going to say yes, and I will say that you get older, you do mellow quite a bit, and my family helped. My faith helped. Mm-hmm. It took decades just to even consider talking to him or speaking to him. And like I say, I had several opportunities to, and unfortunately, I wish I had. When everybody has thoughts and how they felt about the bridge when it happened. They still do. I've met so many people that were my age and a little bit younger. Matt wasn't even born then, but that's okay, Matt. That, have different feelings. I know from firsthand experience that when I talk to Steve and listen to Steve, I know that when Steve thinks of the Skyway, he thinks of, I believe, probably John and the courtroom and what he did to exonerate him. When I think of the Skyway, I think of the victims, because I did go into the bus, and we did spend another 3 weeks after that inspecting the damage. So we all have different thoughts and stuff. I guess back then I was a little bit more hardened by what I had to deal with back then. I felt, I don't want to say cheated, but I think we could have done a much better job recovering every single victim out there that day if we would just had more cooperation and less conflict out there.
Do you have, can you give me a sense of, how many folks you weren't able to bring back?
Well, obviously we weren't able to bring back. We recovered 7 victims that morning. 18 victims were recovered the very first day. The majority of them were found floating. Some of the victims, the last victim was recovered on May 14th, 3.5 miles east of the bridge on the Tampa side. Many of those people did stay what I would consider unnecessarily long in their vehicles and in their buses. Some of the victims were still in their vehicles when they were pulled up. The majority of the vehicles and the bus were removed on Mother's Day, May 11th.
Mm-hmm. So after the initial recovery effort, what was your role in the kind of the cleanup of the wreckage and then your involvement in rebuilding the new Sunshine Skyway?
After the initial accident on May 10th, we began in coordination with the National Transportation Safety Board, gathering documentation and information that would allow us the opportunity to see how the bridge was laying on the bottom so they could refigure or retrace or recreate how it collapsed. We marked as many spots as we could on the points that we were able to identify that weren't damaged. We floated buoys so that they could track it. We swam it. We took photographs. We were out there almost 3 weeks straight just documenting the accident. Our underwater report was initiated and completed, I think, on June 3rd, 1980. As far as the cleanup, once the initial accident was over and our documentation began, contracts were let to have contractors come in and use cutting torches to start with and eventually explosives to come in and help clear the channel. What our responsibility was at that time was to just more or less supervise the cleanup and make sure that if we said that there was a big glob of steel that needed to be removed, that it was removed by the contractors and it was satisfactorily removed.
Mm-hmm. The new bridge was built with safety features including protection for its piers against a potential ship collision. Let's listen to former Tampa Mayor and former Florida Governor Bob Martinez.
And sometimes it takes a tragedy to put science and engineering to work to come up with a better solution. And that certainly was a main impetus, I think, for how you put a bridge that has a shipping channel over its main span. And so I think perhaps out of that tragedy, others learned around the country, around the world, that you just can't build a bridge and hope that no ship will hit it.
So, Robert, we talked about the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in March of this year in Baltimore. What was your reaction when you first heard the news about that?
I'm going to, again, be probably brutally honest. I was shocked. I was a little disgusted just thinking that after the Skyway disaster that it wasn't mandatory and mandated that all the bridges that are in similar situations weren't protected. I would have thought that every state would have done an inventory and reviewed their pier protection and whatnot. It was just almost, I hate to say disgust, but it was very disappointed that it wasn't protected.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us some insights into what's going on up there with the ongoing recovery process? I mean, it sounds quite complex as they work to clear the wreckage of that particular bridge. I mean, what are some of the challenges that they'll be facing?
Well, right now the challenge, I understand that they're cleared quite a bit already. They've got a temporary channel opened up for smaller vessels, something similar that we did at the Skyway. They are in the process still of clearing the main channel. I believe it should be cleared by the end of the month. I'm sure that there are people in the Maryland Department of Transportation that are trying to figure out what type of the new bridge. I understand the federal government has, I don't want to say guaranteed, but has assured them that the funds will be available. It's a main artery, I-95. Couldn't get much more important, especially on the East Coast. I'm sure that pier protection will be included. I'm sure that the Maryland Department of Transportation is now completed an inventory and found out what other bridges may be susceptible to that type of an accident. They may change the rules. They may require tugboats to follow the large vessels. They may require tugboats and a harbor pilot. They may require new features on the bridges as well as on the ships to monitor the location and to identify the bridges in severe weather.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, you're hoping to bring in some other folks, like whether they had connection directly to this tragedy or people who are interested in filmmaking themselves. Can you talk a little more about that?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. So it's a combination of both. We are looking to connect with people who have stories, whether they're locally connected or around in that time, that can speak about the incident, along with collecting information from local filmmakers that can help us re-edit the documentary as well, because the documentary right now is just under 70 minutes, but based on the information that Mr. Raiola just shared and the extended information we're looking to collect from the community, there's definitely some more that we can add onto this story to make it where it needs to be.
Robert, what are you hoping people learn from the conversations and from the film itself?
I guess the big thing that I would like people to learn is that treat each day like it's your last day. When you leave your home, let everybody know how much you care about them and how important they are in your life, because you never know when you're going to get that call, and you may not be here the next day to tell them how much you love them. As far as the documentary, I think it's a history lesson, because as I said, even Matt wasn't here when it happened. People forget. People take for granted the small things in life, like a safe bridge, a safe bus ride, a safe ride back and forth to work. All of that counts in the big picture. You need to be there for your family and your friends. And there's so many people behind the scenes that so many other people never see. Those guys that inspect the elevators, escalators, traffic lights, and stuff like that that make life safe for everybody to go about their business. They're all important. You don't know the name until the doo-doo hits the fan, and once it does, then, of course, everybody realizes your name. So hopefully you do a good job and do what you're supposed to. And like I say, just let everybody know how much you care about them every day.
Matt, where can people find out about the documentary, and what do you want people to take away from it?
We encourage people to follow us on SkywayBridgeDisaster.com, and we hope you kind of get the same message that Mr. Raiola just portrayed when watching the documentary. It is emotional and historical at the same time, so we encourage people to come watch it in person. We have some upcoming events over the summer. This Wednesday, June 12th at the WUSF Marshall Student Center. Mm-hmm. And then Friday, June 21st, we have a special screening in St. Pete at the Greenlight Cinema. Mm-hmm. So for more information, you can definitely visit our website at SkywayBridgeDisaster.com or visit us on social media. We have pages on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you can't make it out to the public appearances, there are some streaming opportunities where you can watch it from home, and that information is also available on our website.
Well, we've been speaking with Matt Cohen. He's the marketing director for the documentary, The Skyway Bridge Disaster. Matt, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And also Robert Raiola, retired Florida Department of Transportation diver who was part of the recovery effort in the aftermath of the disaster and is featured in the documentary. Robert, thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, and thanks for having us and giving us this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you. And since we recorded this interview, the shipping channel in Baltimore's Patapsco River has reopened for traffic, almost 11 weeks after the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. That's our show for this week. Our executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Jackson Harp was our engineer for this episode. Subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks for listening.